Howdy folks, welcome back to War Thunder with the mighty Jingles. Today I'm taking up the F-86 Sabre in a historical battle. And my chief opponent in this game is going to be the Me-262 German rank 20 jet fighter. Now, I have to confess, I was not looking forward to flying the Sabre. And the reason I wasn't looking forward to flying the Sabre was because of my experiences of flying the P-51 Mustang. The Sabre has the same armament as the Mustang, and that I thought was the Mustang's chief problem. It only has 6 50 caliber machine guns. However, it doesn't suffer from the same problems. Well, it kind of does. And the reason I was worried about the Sabre was because my problem with the Mustang was that to use the Mustang effectively, you need to dive on your target and put your speed, which is your chief advantage in the Mustang, to your advantage. But when you're diving on a target at high speed, you have very limited time in which to actually shoot at them. And the Mustang only has 6 50 caliber machine guns. But the Mustang's main problem is that those machine guns don't fire very quickly, and they're all mounted in the wings. So you get about half a second's worth of effective fire on your target before you're past your gun convergence zone, and only 1 or 2 of your machine guns are hitting them. And that severely impacts the amount of damage you can do to the target. Well, you don't have that problem with the Sabre, because those guns are all mounted in the nose. Not only that, they all seem to fire about twice as fast as the 50 calibers on the Mustang. So, the Sabre's actually pretty good. On the other hand, I really suck at flying it. I really don't have the hang of it. I'm going to need some more practice. And again, it's because flying boom and zoom fighters is out of my comfort zone. I'm a dogfighter at heart. I love my Brits. I love my Japanese. But I am growing to become a bit of a fan of the Sabre. And I think once I've had some more games in this thing, I'm actually going to start to really like it. It is very manoeuvrable for a jet. And that's just as well, because the kind of opposition you're going to be up against, the Me-262, the MiG-15, they're pretty manoeuvrable jets as well. Now, the F-86 first flew on the 1st of October 1947, too late to enter service in the Second World War, and it was entered into service with the US Air Force in 1949. While they were in competition for the US Air Force contract to build their next generation of jet fighters, the designers at North American Aircraft, they had a good design with the Sabre, but it couldn't reach the speed that was required to successfully win the contract. And so they went back to the Me-262, which was a swept-wing aircraft, and adopted the same design, with a very thin, swept-back wing, which allowed them to reach the speeds that they needed to get their aircraft in the running for the US Air Force contract. Unlike the Me-262, the advantage of having a swept wing like this is it reduces compressibility problems that you get when you're in high-speed dives like this, where you can easily lose control of the aircraft as you start to approach the speed of sound. The disadvantage is that you suffer low-speed performance problems. So to fix this, they put a slat that you could lower in the leading edge of the wing to increase the thickness of the wing at low speed. And hey presto, both problems solved for the price of one. The superior weapon performance of the F-86 was due to the fact that it didn't use the M2 machine gun that the P-51 did. It used the M3 version of the Browning 50 caliber machine gun, which had an electrically boosted fire rate, which meant that these guns could fire at a rate of 1,200 rounds per minute, significantly better than the Mustang managed to achieve. But probably the biggest advantage that the F-86 had over its contemporaries, and we're talking about aircraft like the MiG-15 here, was that later versions of this aircraft came with a radar-guided gun sight that would use radar to calculate the range of the target, and this was a big advantage over the gyroscopic Second World War era gun sights that the MiGs were equipped with. Now, I'm not exactly sure how, or even if, they've implemented this superior gun sight system, if you like, into War Thunder. I know that the optimal firing range for these M350 cals was 300 meters, and that's typically where the gun convergence was set. Possibly you end up being more accurate, possibly your guns scatter less at that sort of range. That would be my guess as to how they've gone ahead, if indeed they have implemented this superior gun sight in the game. I don't know. But I'll tell you a couple of things that they have done with this aircraft. It climbs incredibly well. it pulls Gs like you would not believe. I mean, I'm pulling 10, 11G turns here, and the aircraft is not only, well, it's not only staying in one piece, and yeah, I probably shouldn't be pulling 10, 11G turns here, but I suck. However, it shows you that not only is the aircraft staying in one piece, it's maintaining its speed and its stability while doing it, at least until one of those 262s shot my tailplane off and I ended up crashing and burning. So that was the end of my little adventure. But I do, even though I suck at flying it, I do like the F-86. You can put this thing into a 30-degree climb and it will still accelerate. The climb performance is fantastic. It is very stable thanks to that swept back wing. It's very, very stable at high speeds. The guns aren't bad. They're certainly better than on the P-51 due to the fact that they're all mounted in the nose, so gun convergence isn't as much of an issue, and they fire at double the rate of fire of the guns on the P-51. It's a very, very stable, forgiving aircraft to fly, and it can pull tight manoeuvres if you need to. Even though the US Air Force retired it by the end of the 1950s, this thing was actually still in service with various different air forces right up to as late as 1994, when it was finally retired from service in the Bolivian Air Force, and its real-world combat performance was impressive. The kind of claims that the US Air Force were making about its kill rate against MiG-15s in the Korean War should probably be taken with a slight pinch of salt, however. Although the claims by both sides in the Korean War are just, it's impossible to reconcile the two. The USA claims they shot down 782 MiG-15s, or MiGs of all designations, for the loss of only 78 Sabres. It's a 10-to-1 kill ratio. The Soviets claim they shot down 600 Sabres. You cannot reconcile those two numbers. More recent research has suggested that the Sabre's kill ratio was in actual effect closer to 2-to-1 rather than the 10-to-1 that the US Air Force claimed. But whichever way you slice the numbers, it was a hell of a capable combat aircraft. In the 1956 Indo-Pakistani War, Squadron Leader Mohammed Mahmud Alam of the Pakistani Air Force flew one of the Sabres, shot down 5 Indian Hawker hunters in less than a minute, and went on to claim 11 kills during the conflict. You had to respect the Sabre. But the Sabre didn't have it all its own way, and that was largely due to this thing, the MiG-15. First flown 3 months after the first flight of the Sabre on the 30th of December 1947, and also entered service in 1949. Now, the Russians had problems with the engines for the MiG-15. The MiG-9, which this aircraft was developed from, used reverse-engineered BMW engines that were used on the Me-262, and they just weren't good enough for a second-generation jet fighter. The Soviets were impressed with the British Rolls-Royce Nene engine, and Rolls-Royce was having trouble selling this engine to anybody because the Derwent engine that they were using on the Gloucester Meteors was working just fine. And the Air Ministry was more interested in Rolls-Royce's Avon engine, so they were having problems finding aircraft to fit the Nene engine too. Now, the Soviets liked the idea of using that engine, but they were in the middle of the Cold War, and the McCoy and Gurevich Design Bureau approached Stalin and said, well, what if we could get this engine from Rolls-Royce? And Stalin is actually on record as having said, what fool will sell us their secrets? Yeah, the British were those fools. There was a socialist government in power in Britain at the time, and a very, very pro-Soviet trade minister who went ahead and gave Rolls-Royce permission to license production of the Rolls-Royce Nene engine to the Russians. Rolls-Royce tried to claim £207 million in license fees from the Russians, who just laughed at them. Nobody would have ever seen that one coming, not during the middle of the Cold War. And the Russians went ahead, reverse-engineered them, were very pleased with the results, and stuck them in the MiG-15s in their thousands. Just want to take a quick break from the history lesson here, by the way, just to point out what's actually going on in this battle. This was one of the finest examples of teamwork I have ever seen a random group of players display in a historical battle. The jets all went after the other jets and covered the ground attack aircraft, and what you're seeing here is an A-26 Invader pilot who is going to rack up 50, that's a 5 with a 0 after it, 50 ground kills, and look how he does it. What he's doing is, he's dropped all his bombs ages ago, but he's not going back to base to rearm. He uses the forward-firing machine guns to strafe, puts himself into level flight, switches back, and opens up with the rear-mounted dorsal and ventral machine guns, which are effectively unlimited ammunition, because the crew-served guns reload themselves. It's only the pilot-controlled guns that run out of ammo and have to be rearmed manually at the airbase in historical battles. And this guy goes on to claim 50 ground kills and basically wins the game for us, purely because he was allowed to go ahead and do his thing completely unmolested by any enemy fighters, because our jets were doing their damn job and going after the enemy Me-262s. So this was the most dazzling display of teamwork from a group of random players I've ever seen in a historical battle. Watch how this guy works these columns. Like a boss. Anyway, back to the MiG-15. One thing about the MiG-15 that always never fails to generate some laughter is the NATO reporting name for the MiG-15. You know, you've got the Foxbat, the Flanker, the Fencer, the Fitter, and so on and so on. The MiG-15's reporting name was the Faggot. Yes, I know, stop laughing at the back. So, I'm just going to call it the MiG-15, otherwise you'll all be sniggering like schoolboys throughout the rest of the video. So, here we go. As far as armament goes, the MiG-15 was more heavily armed than the Sabre, no question about it. The Sabre was restricted to its 650 calibers, but it was able to carry a lot more ammunition. And when you're playing the Sabre in a historical battle, you're gonna feel that difference. You can fight longer. You can afford to take more risky shots when you're flying the Sabre because you do have the ammunition load to spare. The MiG-15 didn't. It was armed with two 23mm cannons, which both carried 80 rounds of ammunition, and one 37mm cannon, which carried 40 rounds of ammunition. So it did pack a bigger punch. It didn't need to hit you with as many shots as the Sabre did, but carrying two different calibers of weapon produced its own problems, because there were F-86 Sabre pilots who would report seeing 23mm cannon shells fly under their aircraft, while 37mm shells were flying over their aircraft, because different weights of ammunition have different ballistic properties. So combined with the fact that the MiG-15 only had an old Second World War era gyroscopic gun sight, combined with the fact that they were firing ammunition of different calibers and different ballistic properties, made accurate shooting against small, agile targets like Sabres very difficult for the MiG-15 pilots. So while it wasn't without its problems, it was a good aircraft. It had superior flight performance in almost every respect than the F-86 Sabre. The main advantage that the Sabre had was better dive performance and that gun sight. But despite that, it performed well in the Korean War, because it was a good aircraft, but also because, and hotly denied by the Soviets at the time, although they have sort of admitted it now, and they weren't fooling anybody at the time either, but most of the MiG-15s that flew in the Korean War, certainly at the start of the conflict, weren't flown by Koreans. They were flown by seasoned Soviet Second World War combat veterans. The Soviets actually went to very great lengths to try to disguise the fact that their pilots were actively flying in combat against NATO forces in Korea. Their aircraft were covered with North Korean or Chinese markings. They were given cards with common Korean words for various flying terms, spelled out phonetically in Cyrillic characters, although during the heat of combat, when pilots are cursing in Russian over the radio circuits, it kind of gave the game away a little. Some of the lengths that they went to were quite comical, actually. The pilots were actually dressed in North Korean or Chinese combat uniforms. Who's that going to fool? You're not going to see the combat uniform of the pilot until he's been shot down and is ejected from his aircraft. The fact that he's not Chinese is probably going to be a bit of a giveaway. and that he doesn't speak Chinese. You know, he's a bloody Russian wearing a Chinese uniform. Who were they expecting to fool? I don't know. However, back to the game. This guy really knew how to fly his MiG-15. Unfortunately, that limited ammo load has come back to bite him in the ass. And he's had to break off, return to base, and attempt to rearm. Now there's actually two Me-262s closing in on him. When Seraphim here landed his MiG-15, Daggett over there in his 262 was 11 kilometers away. You'd think you were safe, right? This is what jet combat's like in War Thunder. There we go, he's just rearmed, now he's got to take off. Remember, that 262 was 11 kilometers away when Seraphim landed his MiG-15. That's how quickly you can get yourself into trouble. Is he going to get away with it? Frankly, I think he deserves to. Yep, he's overshot. That was lucky. But he's still going to be vulnerable while he's taking off. The advantage is all still with these 262s. All we can really hope for at the moment is that they are also low in ammo, because they haven't landed to rearm either. Now, he does have an escorting F-86 up high there and behind them. What's he going to do? Is he going to try to lead these guys on a chase? It looks like they've given up their speed advantage by diving to try to catch him. That F-86, here he goes, into the climb. And this is it. The vertical combat ability of the MiG-15 was very, very good. MiG-15s should always try to fight in the vertical, never in the horizontal. Never try to be turning horizontally against other aircraft, especially not F-86 Sabres. Always do your turns in the vertical. That's where this aircraft excels. And now straight away, look at how he turned the tables on those two Me-262s. Now he's above them. He's got his speed back. He's got the energy advantage. And now it's 2-on-2 again. So he's got the energy advantage over these guys. He can pick his target. He's got a full load of ammo. Look at the speed this thing. I'd hate to know what kind of G's he's pulling here. Although he's not throwing it around the sky like I was doing in my Sabre. Speaking of Sabres, the Sabre does handle very, very well at this sort of altitude. Historically, the MiG-15 was much, much better at high altitude, and that's one of the ways that MiG-15 pilots would just get away from Sabres. They would just go vertical. The MiG-15 had a higher combat ceiling than the Sabre did. You could basically fly higher. It's difficult to translate here into War Thunder, where you don't routinely find people flying at 11 kilometers altitude. But again, you see Seraphim in his MiG-15 going vertical, maintaining his advantages. And it looks like they're splitting off into 1v1 fights here, with the Sabre going after one of the 262s, Seraphim and his MiG-15 going after the other 262. They've successfully split them up. Lovely loop there. And now it looks like he is in fact doubling up on Daggett again in his Me-262. You'll note that those two German pilots are both in a squadron. And this, for me, is the difference between jet combat and prop fighter combat in War Thunder. You get a kind of a taste of it if you fly a boom and zoom kind of aircraft, you know, like the P-51, like the P-47. But it's to a much, much higher degree when you're flying jets. You never get more than half a second of guns on target, and you need to make every single shot count because of the speeds of the aircraft involved. Not sure this is a great idea, getting into a low altitude turning fight with an Me-262. He's dropped his flaps. He can't keep this up forever. could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the 262 maintains its speed at this sort of altitude a lot better than the MiG-15 does. Somebody's shooting at him. Oh, it's an AI biplane. Didn't expect that. Oh, what a dogfight. Look at this. Go on, have him. Have him. Yes! Oh, well done. Well done. Whew. That was quite tense. Okay, now the ball is very firmly in our court. Where's the other 262? And, you know, this, for me, is the essence of historical battles. We're 20 minutes into this video before we've seen our first air-to-air kill. Has that been boring? That's the question you have to ask yourself here. Whether or not you're going to be more of an arcade pilot or a historical pilot, and there's no reason why you can't enjoy both, is going to come down to whether or not watching this has bored you to tears. Because if it has, then you should probably stick to arcade battles. If the idea of watching somebody jockey for position for 10 minutes in order to confirm a kill turns you off, you probably shouldn't waste your time going into historical battles, because this is what it's like. Oh, that Sabre's finally got onto the tail of the 262. Come on, 50 cals, don't let me down. Oh, he's set him on fire. Is that an engine fire? Look, no, it's a fuselage fire. The incendiary ammo, by the way, he's out of ammo now, unfortunately. That's a real shame. He would have had that guy. 262 was trying to lead him back over the anti-aircraft guns on his airfield. Sabre managed to set him alight, ran out of ammo, had to RTB to rearm, which allowed the 262 to land and repair the aircraft, so that's going to cost us. But speaking about the incendiary ammo of the Sabre, it actually fired magnesium, which is great. But the problem is it needs oxygen. It needs oxygen to sustain the combustion, which is fine at this sort of altitude. But up at 30,000 feet, there's not as much oxygen to go around. And so the armor-piercing incendiary ammo for the 50 caliber guns on the F-86 was actually not particularly effective against MiG-15s at the altitudes they liked to fight at. So another little History Channel with Jingles tip there. There's actually quite a funny story about the MiG-15, or one of the MiG-15s in particular. The US Air Force Museum at Dayton, Ohio has a MiG-15 on display there, and this was actually flown by a Korean pilot, Lieutenant No Kum-sok, who landed it at Kimpo Air Force Base on the 21st of September in 1953 when he defected from North Korea. It was flight tested in Okinawa by Chuck Yeager himself, and then was brought back to the US, and America offered to return it to its rightful owners, the USSR. But of course, Russia, even though they wanted the aircraft back, they couldn't admit it was one of theirs. So America were saying, yeah, look what we've got. And the Russians were going, we're not listening. So they ended up obviously keeping it, which was the intention all along. And it's on display at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, to this day. Anyway, back to the game. And old Seraphim is hungry for his next ME-262 here. He's obviously trying to turn the tables and catch this guy as he was taking off, which is how most ME-262s were actually killed in real life, either when they were taken off or landing. But he just wasn't quite fast enough to get back here. And that flak's coming in thick and fast. The 262 pilot, no, didn't get him. 262 pilot isn't stupid. He knows he's got to use every advantage he's got, and all that flak is certainly helping him out. Seraphim isn't stupid though. He's staying, instead of immediately going into the climb, he zooms away at a low altitude. You stay below 100 feet. Makes it very difficult for flak to hit you. Now he's maintained the speed while he was zooming away there, because he didn't go into a climb. He's got the distance. Now he's going into the climb. He's building up the energy advantage against the 262. But this game is almost over. It's going to time out. I'd really like to see him get this kill. He definitely worked for it. Eyes on the target. He's calculating the angles. Looks like he's going to take the risk. He knows he knows this guy is not going to abandon the safety of friendly flak, and he's going to have to go in there and deal with him. 262 pilot knows he's at a lower altitude. He's going to have to judge the approach and try and turn inside the MiG. But it's game over. That was a shame. I really feel that Seraphim deserved that kill. But look at that. Look at the Invader pilot. 50 ground kills. That is a Hero Bomber Award right there. And yeah, I didn't do particularly well at all. In fact, it's probably safe to say I really, really sucked. But I like the Sabre. I do actually like it. The firepower is not bad. I'm not 100% convinced it should be a rank 20 aircraft, though. And it's because of the firepower. There were later versions of the Sabre that were fitted with 20mm cannons. And I would not be surprised if we didn't find... I think it would make more sense to me if a 20mm cannon armed version of the Sabre was the American rank 20 fighter, and the 50 caliber machine gun armed version of the Sabre was, for example, a rank 16 or 17 fighter. That would make more sense to me. The MiG-15, on the other hand, yeah, very, very capable aircraft. And I haven't flown the MiG-15 much, but watching guys like Seraphim here in this historical battle, the way he played has taught me a lot. And I'm going to see if I can take what he's demonstrated in this game and use it to my advantage when I have a go with the MiG-15. But I think this historical battle in particular was just a fantastic example of, one, good pilots on both sides, but more importantly, good teamwork on the behalf of the winning team. The jets went after the other jets. They didn't try to avoid combat. They covered the bombers and allowed the A-26 Invader pilot to walk away with a Hero Bomber Award with 50 ground kills, and that's the way it should be. It never happens in arcade battles. It doesn't happen often in historical battles, but it happens more often in historical battles than anywhere else. And it's really, really good to see, and I hope you certainly, I certainly hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed watching that game after I got shot down. As always, folks, watch your six. I'll catch you next time.